We're now going to take a look at how to add or edit features of an existing part. So we have on the screen a basic nested sheet of cabinets, and on the right side is the info pane. So the info gives us information about an individual part. As from other videos, when you select on a part, it then updates the info tab to explain what that part is, where it's sitting on the sheet, its size, material, and the information there. It acts as if all of those objects are grouped together. So if we wanted to select or just remove, say, the hinge holes in this, you can't just select the hinge holes without all of the other objects being selected. So if you're familiar already with CAD software where objects are grouped together, it's basically what we have here. We have them as a group. But one thing that is different is PartNester 3 does not really have an ungroup and a regroup. Even though we are able to, I'm going to say ungroup, to be able to edit individual components, even at that stage, the objects are still grouped together. And we're going to show how to make that happen and work. So the first thing that we want to be able to do is edit any individual part or object within that part. And to do so, we're going to come over here and click the Edit Part button. So now with that button checked, notice when you select on a part, the info is still being updated based on what that part is, but the objects within that part or that part is no longer being selected. So I'll show that once more. We will uncheck the Edit Part, and all of those are now still grouped and remain together. Unchecking the edit, or putting a checkbox in the edit part, again allows us to select an individual part to work on, which is the left side, right side, and there is a left side. Now another thing that we want to pay attention to is if we want to add a part, what layer do we want to add that part to? That is found on the toolpathing tab. I'm going to check that so we have both the info and the toolpath opened. So as you select any one layer or any one feature within the cutting features, you will notice that they become selected. So this is the same as making that layer or that object the current layer. So anything that we draw is going to get applied to whatever object or whatever feature you have selected in this list. So hopefully this video kind of clears some of that up, and we'll first start with how to remove a part or a section of the component. So for this right side, so say if we do not want to have these 4 hinge holes at that location or just don't want them at all, we're going to select Edit Part. This allows us to select and click in here to make that part the current part, and now we can individually select and hit the delete on the keyboard. And remove those. There is also a Control Z. I'm going to undo that just to show that we also have the ability to draw out a sweep select to be able to select 1, 2, 3, and 4, and hitting delete on the keyboard and removes those parts. Now selecting or unchecking the edit part allows us to get back into that grouped selection of the objects. Now we're going to take a look at how to add an object to this cabinet part. So say if we needed maybe a wire grommet or some sort of hole on the back section here. We want to look at first our layers. Is there anything else in our layer sheet or list of features that are already set up to be toolpathed based on that. In this case, I really don't have anything because our drawers, holes, hinge holes, and all of this are just either using the drill bank or a drilling function, and there isn't anything that is set up to cut a circle on the inside at a set depth, other than even though this is backdatos, that is cutting on the inside. So we could quite possibly use this layer here. So we'll take a look at how to maybe add a hole to the backdato section or even the side dado section. So with the edit part selected, and with the layer or the feature that we want to add this part selected, I'm going to go into draw, and we're going to put in a circle, and it is now asking on the lower screen on the status bar, it's asking us to select a position that we want that hole to be. So there's a couple ways of doing that. If I know exactly how far I want it to be off of, say, this corner here, there's a couple steps that we're going to have to do to make that happen. So first, I'm going to type the letter E, and that is to create a snap point to the end point. So if you hover your mouse over top of the lower left of this corner, you'll see that red dot. That is selecting the center of the circle to be at the corner there. Now it is asking us in that lower status bar to select the radius of the circle. So if we want a 2-inch diameter circle here for a grommet, the radius is going to be 1. So I'm just going to type the letter 1, number 1, and then enter. So now that places that circle, a 1-inch radius circle or 2-inch diameter, with the center being at the back left corner of that part. But we want to have that part 2 inches down in the X direction and maybe 6 inches up or 4 inches up in the Y. We're going to do that with a 2-step process under Modify, selecting Move. It's asking what objects do we want to have moved. Select this. Now it's asking for the base point. So the base point really doesn't matter. I'm just going to select there, and you see that it is moving. And if you are familiar with other CAD functions, in the lower corner, I want to move, starting with an @ symbol, I want it to move, say, 3 inches. So again, I'm going to move 3 inches in the 180-degree direction. So 180 is to the left, 90 degrees is straight up, and then hit enter. I'm going to right click, and just the last command that was used is in the right click menu. I'm going to select move again, selecting that object, selecting a base point for that object, and I want to move that up in the direction 90 degrees, so let's move that at 4 inches at 90, and then enter. So that is now in the location that we would want that hole to be. And just to show how that is staying grouped with the side that we have, I will just uncheck the edit part, selecting that part. Notice that that circle is also selected with the part that we just added it to. The one thing that we have not given yet is any depth to that part. So if we want it to go all the way through, and we can see the material thickness here is 0.75, we also see that on the top section here of the sheet. To move this down, it's kind of the same way. The depth is based on the elevation of the drawing. So we can't quite see it since we're in a 2-dimensional view, but this line is really not on the same plane as this dado. So we want to be able to move this circle down into the material by the depth that we want to cut. If I want to cut all the way through, I'm going to enter in and move that down to a negative 0.75. So let's take a look at how to do that. Again, I'm going to select Edit Part, selecting the circle or the object that I want to move. I'm going to select Modify and select Move. Again, it's asking for a base point, and this time we're just moving into the Z, so I'm going to use the coordinate system to make this happen. So I am going to say in the text box below that I want to move it from 0, 0, 0. So that is X, Y, Z. That is where I want to move it from, and I want to move it to the location of, and again, that's not moving to, it's moving it relative to the base point that we just created, which is down here in the lower left. Now I'm looking for the next point. I want to move it to 0, 0, because I don't want to move the location of X and Y. I want to have that remain the same place. And this time we just enter in minus 0.75 and then enter. It doesn't look like anything happened because it is visually in the same place in our top view, but what that has done is shifted that circle down into the material by 3/4 of an inch. And again, we could see that in seeing that that part still stays grouped together by clicking Edit Part, selecting that part. Notice that that circle stays and remains selected. For the toolpathing of that, it is going to follow the same toolpath logic and parameters that we set up for the backside dado. So as you notice, when we selected that backside dado, that circle is also selected. You may be thinking, well, there's different depths. The depth with PartNester all comes from the geometry and not any data that we've entered in. We are able to specify a distance that we want to add to the depth. So if we wanted that to be a little bit deeper or not as deep, you can specify that number here. But in general, the depth is coming from the selected objects or the objects on the features to machine or the layers in this DXF. So in this case, the backside dados, depending on what settings we had in Cabinet Parts Pro or whatever cabinet software this is coming from, the depth of that dado is based on the settings that you've entered in on the data entry side. But the location of this hole, the depth, is based on what we just entered in. I know this is a little bit confusing, but hopefully you're getting it. So now we're just going to quickly show what has happened with the toolpath of this part. So I'm going to click Save Toolpaths, give it a name, and we could see that that hole has been offset to the inside based on the data that we have entered in for the backside dado. And if at a point we do not want that, we can, I'm going to clear the toolpaths and again edit the part, select the items that we do not want, and just hit the delete on the keyboard. That will remove that selected object. Also point out from the other videos to show how to move. Since they are grouped together and all newly drawn objects are still specified to that object, you could right click, and when we move this, that object or all objects that are associated with that part also move with it. So we'll move that back down into its location. It is possible to draw out without having it grouped. And the difference here I will show, we do not have the edit part selected. I will still put a drawing on the backside dado. Now drawing out a circle again with the edit part on the info tab not selected, drawing a new object is not going to apply it or connect it to the part that we may think it is. So notice when we select this part, that newly drawn circle is not being selected, but since we did have that backside layer selected, it is still associated with the toolpathing. So if we did calculate and save the toolpaths for this, it is still going to toolpath and create the toolpaths for that circle, but it is no longer associated, and it is not associated with any particular cabinet part. So if you did have an object that you just needed to cut out separately and not have it be associated with the part, you could use the draw functions and apply them to any set layer as well. And at this point, since this circle is not part of a grouped or a selected cabinet part, you select the part and hit delete on the keyboard. That removes it. The toolpath remains. To clear any toolpaths, you can click the clear toolpaths button and we are back to the beginning. You could also select and move any row of holes. So if I want to remove or move this selected row of holes down, again, just coming over and clicking the edit part, going to do a sweep select to select all of those holes, going into modify, move, and you see in that lower left it is asking for a base point to move them, and you could specify typing the letter H will set horizontal movement or vertical movement. That is the ortho. And if we want to move it down a specific distance from its current location, just using at, say 4 or 5 inches in the direction of 270 degrees, which is in the down direction, hitting enter, that just moved it down from where the base point was selected down 5 inches, or moved it 5 inches in the 270 degree direction. There will be more videos on how to use PartNester 3 in drawing and some of the CAD features, but for now that is how we add and remove objects from a particular cabinet component.